I was traveling this summer. I went to see friends in Mississippi and friends in Louisiana and discovered that there are families that are completely broken up over this, where people just aren't even talking to each other anymore because everything that gets said is making it worse. That caused me to reflect, and I said to Rudy, I'd like to do a talk. And he said, oh, good, and agreed. And then, of course, I had to spend a great deal of time going, what have I done? What have I done? Okay. So I've been making notes for a while, and yesterday a good friend said to me, well, just remember, it's like telling a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I hadn't really thought about it that way. But I says to myself, I says, what was the beginning of thinking about this business around the recent election? And I remembered back to last summer when lots of friends were looking at who the choices were and getting upset. And I said, well, look, I'm not feeling upset. America's going to get the president that it needs and deserves. Well, and so when we got the president that we needed and deserved, I says to myself, I says, what does this mean? And some of you may have seen on a note that I made that I consider curiosity and reflection to be two essential spiritual tools. So curiosity of what does this mean? Not why did it happen, or even too much how did it happen, but what is this? And then a little bit of thought, a little bit of reflection. And came immediately to mind something an old lovely teacher of mine said, well, lessons unlearned will be repeated with emphasis. Okay. And so and it also comes down to trust in the universe. Do I believe that everything that happens to me and around me is for my best good, for my highest good, or not? And if you actually espouse that, or even want to act as if you think it's true, then you have to say, okay, if this is for my highest good, what now? And so I realized that for me, at least, it's caused a great deal of reflection. And then I looked at all the pain and I said, okay. So I thought today I'd try to share with you some thoughts and ideas about some ways of looking at it that might be more useful and less painful. And one of them, and probably one of the most important, is to ask yourself, do I trust that whatever is happening in the world that I see is for my highest good? And if you haven't got to there yet, then the only way I know to handle that is to act as if it were so. Yeah, I call it as ifing. I don't really believe that, okay? But I'm going to act as if it were so. And if you're willing to do that, in whatever circumstance you find yourself, you're going to find that things do begin to change. You have to give yourself some room to move. And that's the opposite of reactivity. If we think of our divine selves, our whole selves, that self that we don't know very well, as a giant, shining, completely quiet pool, a reflecting pool, then every time we have a reactivity or a reaction, it's like throwing a pebble or a rock into the pool. And what happens? It gets all not transparent, and you can no longer see yourself in it. So what's part of the job here? Part of the job here is to figure out what is the reactivity and how can I reduce it? And I can't answer for you what is the reactivity, but I have come to believe that we only react in others those things within ourselves that we really don't want to look at. And you may say to yourself, but I'm not a liar. And you may take that as an action of every day. I'm not a liar. Well, within all of us, because we have incorporated all the things that we've been taught, there are those who are liars, okay? And they're inside. I was listening to the radio this morning, and a lady who is what do they call themselves? A seriously alt-right lady who runs alt-right lady groups. And she wants to recruit more alt-right ladies to, did I say white? Yes, right, white, those guys. She wants to recruit them, and they said, well, how do you do that? She said, I concentrate on the fear. I increase the fear. I talk about rape. And I says to myself, clue number one. Everything where you have reactivity, or where you see others who have reactivity, at the bottom of it all is fear, okay? So when you have a reaction to somebody which causes you to go at them, any of us ever had one of those? What are you doing? You're increasing the fear. You're confirming the fear. You're making the fear more real. So first invitation is to sit down and say, every time you have that reaction, 3 deep breaths, and say, what can I say to this person that is not going to increase the fear? And an example I can use about that, I have a couple of wonderful friends, a gay couple who live in Louisiana, not the easiest assignment in the universe. And they fortunately have another couple of gay friends who just live kind of across the street, catty-cornered. In between, there's a man who's a retired cop who used to be somebody that decided he was going to make friends with his neighbors and did. And Ivan told me that he was over there. He says, I just don't know what to do about so-and-so. I just don't know. And I say, he thinks this is okay. It's really not okay. Now, my friend Ivan's a little reactive, would you say? Okay. I said, and what happened? And he said, nobody will talk to me anymore. So-and-so next door won't talk to me anymore. Your partner won't talk to me anymore. And I said, what do you expect? And that's what Ivan said to him. And I said, Ivan, I've known him 40 years. I said, you know that the useful response in that case would have been, that must hurt. Okay? And when somebody comes at you with a if you can take enough deep breaths to be able to say something on the order of, that must hurt, or tell me more about that, instead of, you're wrong. Because what does it mean when you say you're wrong? It means it's more important to me to be right than it is to be one with the person that I'm talking to. Okay? Is that ever true? Every one of us comes here every Sunday, and what do we say? We are one. Okay? We say that. We do our best in the areas where it's easy for us to make that be true. Well, I consider that Mr. Trump is an invitation to help us to try that in areas that are not so easy and not so fun. And no matter what your politics are, whether you really felt like we needed a change, and weird as this is, it is a change, or as Rudy said last week, quite a mystery, or whether you're feeling very threatened, well, do you feel threatened when you're not afraid? No. So if you discover that you're feeling threatened, this is just a gift to you to be able to look and see at what you're afraid of. What are you afraid of? And is that real? A friend of mine said, we have a lot of beliefs, and many of them we learned, and we carry them around as if they're real. But I've decided, he said, that any belief that causes suffering is a mistaken belief. Okay? So if you have beliefs that are causing you suffering, and one of them might be, nobody should like this guy, then it might be that that's a mistaken belief. And you can use your curiosity and your capacity to reflect to explore that belief and decide, okay, look at that, I believe that, and it might not be true. I believe I'm going to act as if it were not true for a little while and just see what happens. Anybody here have somebody in particular that's very difficult for them? Sometimes you just need a break. Okay? I have a lovely friend who doesn't get along with her mother. And she said to me, because we both know each other's mother, she said, my mother likes you better than she likes me. And I said, well, cheer up. My mother likes you better than she likes me. Now, we're very fortunate after another 15 years, I can happily say, my mother likes me, but it took a while. And she said, what can I do about it? I said, well, look, every time you meet up with your mother, something unpleasant happens, right? Yeah. Okay, so I said, so you're not stupid. It's time for you to consider how to have some neutral to positive experiences with your mother. It may not be very long. I mean, I wouldn't say go off on a weekend together. It may just be lunch, but you can imagine that you can be neutral to positive with somebody for a short period of time. So if you've got one of these thorns in the side, then sit back when you've had some deep breaths and they're not in the room and figure out how you might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or a dozen neutral to positive interactions and see how that works. Okay, this is all just kind of out there stuff. The biggest thing about this whole amazing time that we're living in is that this is inside stuff. Everything that's happening is to invite each one of us to look at what's inside of us that's not as it needs to be. I think Mr. Trump's been a blessing in a couple of very unusual ways. And one of them is, having worked and lived in Mississippi for over 15 years, it is now real obvious that the prejudice and hate that always felt to me like it was there is really there, okay? It's up in our faces, it's up in everybody's faces, and we can't pretend anymore that it's not there, which is an invitation to each one of us to say, oh, and what, if anything, am I able to do about that? Okay? This is a toughie, because it's more fun not to look at the things that you don't like, but that's the invitation. And so as I was thinking about all this and going, gee, I'm a little further along than I was with this a few years ago, I said to myself, why is it? How is it? What's the tools that have helped? And now you may notice each of you has a mirror. Who doesn't have a mirror yet? Okay, yeah, like one of those. Our ushers are going to go around and let anybody who wants to have one have a mirror, because it's for our meditation. About 10 years ago, our friend Rudy Harst gave me a little assignment in the course of spiritual direction that I thought, well, that's not tough. And then I went home, and it was probably right there in the top 10 of the hardest things I've ever tried to do in terms of spiritual growth. And that, what he said to me was, go sit in front of a mirror, look straight in your own eyes, and say to yourself, Ellen, I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. Nikki, I don't know if I love you or not.
Your name here.
Actually, you know what I really mean about that. So the reason that you have a mirror is that today I'm going to invite you to try this exercise as part of your meditation. Now, there's a couple of cautions about that. As I said to you, I found this to be one of the most difficult things I have ever worked with. And the first reason was I make a real effort not to lie to myself. And I looked in the mirror and I said that, and I thought, that's a lie. The one who was sitting looking at the one in the mirror didn't feel that way. The one who was sitting looking at the one in the mirror had a lot of judgments about that person in the mirror, about all the things that that person in the mirror does wrong, or doesn't do right, or could do better, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody here have that kind of dialogue with themselves ever? Okay. So that was the first thing that I discovered, was that the one who was sitting there couldn't do it. So wanting to do the exercise and not wanting to lie, I suddenly created this picture in myself. Oh, look, there's a committee in there. Anybody ever notice there seems to be more than one person inside of you? So I just decided I was going to let different people on the committee sit in the chair and until I found somebody who could say that and really mean it. Ellen, I love you unconditionally just the way you are. We almost never hear that in the outside world. If we're fortunate, we have a few people who can say that to us and we can really hear it, but not everybody does. And lots of the people who are afraid all the time don't have anybody in their lives who can say that to them. So the first thing is you say it to yourself. And you say it to yourself with practice and as often as you can until it sits true for you. Because what's the next step? Can you imagine? Okay, the next step is that you can look at somebody else and say, and really mean it without lying, I love you unconditionally just the way you are. Now, those of us that are parents know that there are times when saying that to your child ranges in the difficulty range of 98 to 100%. But all of us that are human beings know that that can be a real tough assignment. And yet, what is spiritual growth or spiritual development? It's getting yourself to the point where that's kind of true all the time, where you don't need to judge yourself or anybody else, and where you can say that and have it be true. So the reason that we're going to start practicing this today is that someday you are going to be able to glue a picture of you-know-who on the back of the mirror, turn it around and say, Donald, I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. Now, I'm nowhere near able to do that yet. Is there anybody here who, okay. Right. So that's what we're going to be doing for exercise today. And I'm going to, where did I put my notes? I made all these notes. Okay, the gifts of Trump. He makes visible the degree of prejudice and hate that are in our world. He also gives me an opportunity to look at what I react to and to understand that whatever I'm reacting to is actually within me. In other words, the pool does not make ripples because the pool makes ripples. The pool makes ripples because I throw rocks in it. My divine self does not break up because that's its nature. It breaks up because I'm throwing rocks into it one way or another. So what are some of the things that you're going to watch for? You're going to watch for yourself or other people playing Ain't It Awful? It's just so bad. I can't imagine how it happened. Why? Uses up a lot of energy, does no good. You're going to watch for Let's You and Him Fight. Mr. Trump is very good at that. Let's you and him fight. Okay? And you're going to not waste those opportunities to be alert, to be curious, and to be reflective. Okay? Now, let's begin our meditation. Everybody get comfortable. I'm going to remind you that in that Caucasian game called Bridge, you can play the game No Trump. You have to know the rules. You have to have a partner. You have to have clear goals, a bid, and maybe you need to think about what's your bid in relation to Mr. Trump. And you have to be courageous. What does courageous mean? Full of heart in relation to whatever it is that you're working on. So take a look at your mirror now. 3 deep breaths. Each time you're blowing out the resistance. Remember as you do your exercise that if the one that's saying it is lying, just ask somebody else in there to take the chair. And begin. I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. And repeat that to yourself as often as you need to while our Mighty Mighty band gives us a little meditation music. note your resistance. And we're going to do this for a few minutes. So do the best you can. If you need to put your mirror down and just sit quietly, that's okay too. I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. No need to change or fix anything. Resting in myself, with myself. I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. Now come on back. You're very welcome to take the mirror home with you if you would like. If you don't want to, you can leave it in the basket outside the door. Thank you.